In the heart of Africa's Serengeti, where the sun scorches the earth and life hangs in a delicate balance, lived a man who was more than just a ranger. He was a guardian, a legend. But when he took his final breath, no one expected who would show up to say goodbye. What happened next left everyone speechless, and will leave a mark on your heart forever. In the vast, untamed plains of the Serengeti, where the wind carries the scent of sun-scorched earth and distant roars echo across golden horizons, there lived a man named William Carter. To the outside world, he may have seemed like just an old ranger, worn boots, sun-weathered skin, and a dusty hat pulled low over tired eyes. But to those who truly knew him, the young rangers he mentored, the villagers who respected him, and even the wild creatures he protected, William was something far greater. He was a quiet force of nature, a living legend whose heart beat in rhythm with the wild. For over half a century, he had given everything to this land. He had mended broken wings, pulled poachers' traps from bleeding paws, and whispered words of calm to animals no one else could approach. Even in retirement, when age bent his back and heat pressed heavy on his chest, he still climbed into his rusty old truck each morning to patrol the reserve, refusing to let go of the place he loved more than life itself. But one sweltering day, under a cruel sun and cloudless sky, William made one final journey, this time to check on an injured rhino he had nursed through the night. No one knew it would be his last. As the heat bore down and silence closed in, he fell, alone, far from help, with only the dry grass and distant rustle of wildlife bearing witness to his collapse. His colleagues raced to him, their faces pale with fear, but it was too late. The heart that had held so much love for the wild had finally given out. Yet, the story did not end there. The next morning, during a quiet funeral held beneath the soft light of dawn, something extraordinary happened, something no one could have foreseen. From beyond the trees, a low, thunderous roar rolled across the reserve. A massive lion, regal and scarred, emerged from the bush, walking with solemn purpose. The crowd froze in fear. But the lion did not attack. Instead, it approached the casket, and bowed its head. It was then that one of the rangers recognized the scar on the lion's side. 15 years ago, William had saved this very animal from a poacher's trap. No one had seen it in years, until now. Somehow, the lion had returned. And in that sacred moment, as man and beast stood reunited in grief, the Serengeti held its breath. The lion's sudden appearance cast a spell over the courtyard. Conversation ceased. The gentle hum of insects faded. It was as if the entire Serengeti had held its breath. Towering above the heads of the mourners, the lion walked with a slow, deliberate gait, each step heavy, echoing through the silence like a drumbeat. Its golden mane, sun-kissed and wild, shifted gently in the morning breeze. There was no fury in its eyes, no fearsome snarl. Instead, its gaze held something far more haunting: grief, recognition, purpose. People instinctively stepped back, their hearts pounding. Some reached for radios, others froze in place. Elijah, William's closest companion in the field, instinctively moved forward, his hand held out as if to shield the others, though he himself was trembling. But the lion gave no sign of aggression. It did not roar or bare its teeth. It simply kept walking, toward William's casket. The wooden bed lay beneath the shade of an old acacia tree, where sunlight filtered through the leaves in flickering patches. The old ranger's face was calm, serene, untouched by pain, as if he had simply drifted into sleep. And now, as if drawn by an invisible thread of memory and loyalty, the lion approached the casket and stopped. For a long moment, it stood still, unmoving, its chest rising and falling in deep, steady breaths. Then, in a gesture that sent shivers through every soul present, the lion slowly lowered its massive head to the ground at the foot of the casket. Its powerful frame folded with grace and reverence, not unlike a soldier kneeling before a fallen commander. The silence deepened, thick with emotion. Elijah felt his breath catch. His eyes welled up, and his voice cracked when he finally whispered, "It's him, it's the lion we saved. All those years ago." Musa, standing nearby, turned sharply. "You're sure?" Elijah nodded, his eyes fixed on the scar, a faded gash that cut through the lion's left flank. It was unmistakable. William pulled him from a hunter's snare. "We thought he'd never survive. But he did." Now, 15 years later, that same lion had returned, not as a predator, not as a threat, but as a mourner. The crowd slowly began to shift, some stepping closer, drawn not by curiosity, but by awe. Mothers clutched their children. Rangers exchanged glances, tears silently rolling down their cheeks. Even the birds, perched on the rooftops, seemed to sit in stillness. A sacred connection was unfolding before their eyes, a bond between man and beast that defied logic, that lived beyond time. And then the lion lifted its head, gazed at William's still body for the last time, and let out a roar. It wasn't a roar of dominance or fear. It was low, deep, and mournful, a sound soaked in sorrow and memory. It rolled across the grasslands, echoing through the trees and over the hills like a farewell lament that only the wild could offer. It was a roar that carried pain and gratitude. Elijah's knees weakened. He dropped to the earth, overcome by emotion, pressing a hand over his mouth. Musa turned away, unable to hide the tears streaming down his face. Around them, the entire sanctuary wept, not just for the man they had lost, but for the inexplicable beauty of the moment they had just witnessed. In that instant, the boundaries between man and nature vanished. Grief united them, not in words, but in spirit. As the final echoes of the lion's roar faded into the golden morning sky, a quiet resolve settled over the crowd. No one spoke, yet every eye shared a collective understanding. They were witnessing something rare and sacred, something that would be passed down in stories for generations. Slowly, the group began to prepare for the final part of William Carter's funeral. His body, wrapped in a simple cloth and cradled in a handmade wooden casket, was lifted gently by 6 rangers, Elijah among them, his hands trembling but steady with duty. Musa walked beside him, carrying a woven basket of wildflowers William had once loved. As they moved through the sanctuary's narrow paths, heading toward the quiet field where William had spent countless mornings studying the tracks of elephants and the rhythms of the wind, the lion followed. Not beside them, not behind them, but with them. The beast moved at a solemn pace, never once turning away, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. The sun, now fully risen, bathed the procession in warm, honeyed light. The tall grasses whispered in the wind, as if the land itself was bidding farewell to its guardian. Children of the sanctuary staff walked barefoot, scattering flower petals ahead of the casket. Elders murmured soft prayers in their native tongue, their voices low and reverent. Some carried wooden carvings, small animals, each symbolizing William's life work, and placed them in his honor at the edge of the trail. When the group reached the burial site, a quiet, open field beneath a large baobab tree where William used to sit and watch the herds pass in the distance, the digging had already begun. The soil was soft, reddish, and warm. It smelled of earth and age and memory. The lion stopped a few paces away, sat down, and watched. As the casket was lowered into the grave, Elijah felt a tightening in his chest, not just from grief, but from the overwhelming beauty of what was happening. It was as if nature itself had sent a representative to witness the final resting of one of its own. He knelt by the grave, whispering, "We'll keep it going, William. Everything you taught us, we'll protect it." Musa laid a stone at the head of the grave, engraved by hand. William Carter, guardian of the wild, 50 years of devotion. A hush fell again as one final prayer was said, carried gently by the wind. Then, just as the last clump of soil was placed atop the grave, the lion stood. He took slow steps forward, approaching the stone. No one dared stop him. No one even breathed. And then, in a moment so surreal it seemed plucked from myth, the lion pressed his head gently against the earth. His eyes closed. He stayed like that, unmoving, almost like a statue carved in honor of the man beneath. Minutes passed. The sun began to dip lower. The shadows stretched long and soft. And when the lion finally rose, he let out one final, low roar, not of pain this time, but something gentler. A farewell. A blessing. He turned, walked away into the tall grass, and vanished, his figure swallowed by the wild he had once been rescued from. But the silence he left behind carried more meaning than 1,000 words. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long amber rays across the Serengeti. Dust shimmered in the warm light, dancing gently through the breeze. The burial ground had fallen completely silent, save for the soft rustle of dry leaves in the nearby baobab and the occasional mournful call of a distant bird. Elijah stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the lion had disappeared. Though the beast was gone, its presence still lingered, an invisible weight pressing gently on everyone's chest, as if the earth itself was reluctant to let go of the moment. His throat tightened as he tried to swallow the lump that had been building since morning. He didn't speak, he couldn't. His heart was too full, his memories too loud. He turned slowly to look at the freshly covered grave. The stone marker, though simple, seemed to radiate a quiet nobility. It stood not just for a man, but for a legacy, a soul interwoven with the wild heart of the land. Musa stood nearby, his hands clenched by his sides. His gaze was distant, lost in thoughts that pulled him backward in time. He remembered being a scared young volunteer, fumbling with a tranquilizer rifle, and how William had quietly walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said, "Don't fight the wild, understand it." It was the first time he felt like he truly belonged. Now, that calm guiding voice was gone. As the others began to leave the field in respectful silence, Elijah and Musa remained behind. They knelt by the grave together, like sons mourning a father. Elijah pulled a small, leather-bound notebook from his pocket, William's old field journal. Its pages were worn, the ink faded in places, but the notes inside captured a lifetime of wonder, migration patterns, healing techniques, names of orphan animals he'd nursed back to health. He placed it gently on the grave, tears tracing silently down his cheeks. "He left everything behind for this land," Elijah whispered, voice trembling. "And somehow, I think the land remembers." That night, the sanctuary held a vigil. Staff and villagers gathered by candlelight under the open sky. No speeches were prepared, none were needed. People shared stories, fragments of memory like puzzle pieces that painted the image of a man larger than life yet deeply human. Some laughed. Others cried. Most did both. Then came the moment no one expected. As the stars blinked awake overhead, a low, familiar growl echoed from the darkness beyond the sanctuary gates. It wasn't threatening. It was more like a call, a deep, resonant sound that rolled across the plains like a wave. The lion had returned. But he didn't approach. He sat at the edge of the sanctuary, just outside the light's reach, watching. A child, barely 6 years old, pointed and whispered, "He's still protecting him." From that night onward, the lion became a part of the sanctuary's soul. Occasionally, he would return, always at dusk, always in silence, to sit by the grave. He never came too close, never lingered too long. Just long enough to remind them that love, even across the boundary between man and beast, never truly dies. The days that followed felt heavy. Each morning began with a silence that seemed to stretch wider than the plains themselves. The bustling sanctuary, once filled with the steady rhythm of radio calls, vehicle engines, and soft chatter, now moved slower, more deliberately, as if time itself had bowed its head in mourning. Elijah stood outside the sanctuary office, holding a small tin box in both hands. Inside were old photographs, field notes, and a weathered ranger's badge, things that had once belonged to William Carter. His mentor. His second father. He stared down at the items, a tremor in his chest building with each passing second. Grief, like the heat of the Serengeti sun, pressed on him relentlessly. He slowly opened the box and pulled out a faded photo, one taken years ago, with William crouching beside a tranquilized elephant calf. He was smiling that familiar half-smile, a mix of warmth and fatigue, the kind of expression a man wears when he knows he's exactly where he belongs. Elijah traced the edges of the photo with his thumb, his mind swirling with the weight of everything that had been lost. Musa approached from behind, his footsteps quiet but sure. "You're thinking about that day in the northern basin, aren't you?" he asked softly. Elijah nodded, not needing to say a word. That was the day William had thrown himself between an injured cheetah and a reckless poacher, taking a deep gash across the arm to protect the animal. The memory was burned into his mind, not just the blood, or the chaos, but the look in William's eyes. Calm. Resolute. Unshaken. He wasn't afraid, Elijah finally said. Even when things were at their worst, he never ran. Musa's eyes darkened with emotion. He taught us all how to stand our ground, with honor. Even now, I feel like he's still guiding us. That afternoon, they returned to the grave again, just the two of them. The wind carried with it the scent of dry grass and distant rains, and the sky was draped in soft gray clouds, casting a cool shadow over the land. At the head of the grave, the stone marker stood quietly, with a fresh bouquet of wild acacia flowers laid at its base. Elijah crouched and cleared away a few fallen leaves, brushing the dust from the engraved name, William Carter, guardian of the wild, friend of the forgotten. As he stood back up, he caught sight of something in the distance. The lion. It stood tall and silent beneath a nearby tree, golden mane rippling slightly in the breeze. Its eyes met Elijah's, an ancient, unspoken recognition passed between them. This wasn't just an animal. This was a witness. A soul that had seen the truth of William's heart, and returned to honor it again and again. Elijah felt a chill, not from fear, but from awe. He whispered, "He really meant something to you, didn't he?" The lion did not move. It simply stared for a moment longer, then turned and vanished into the golden grass without a sound. And in that instant, Elijah understood, this bond between man and beast, it was not merely one of survival or territory. It was deeper. It was sacred. It was love in its purest, most primal form. Some say animals forget. But on that quiet afternoon, a lion proved the world wrong. In its silent vigil by the grave of the man who once saved its life, it taught us something no words could say, that love, loyalty, and gratitude know no boundaries. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And remember, sometimes, the wild has a heart bigger than we can ever imagine.